Well, good morning, and thank you for being at our annual Caring for Kids Breakfast. I'm Nancy Bergstrom, and it's an honor to be here today as a chair of the Caring for Kids Breakfast and a member of the CFK Advisory Council and a new member of the Interfaith Board of Directors. I'm also the founder of B Financial Wealth Management. I want to start out today by thanking our sponsors. Their generous support ensures that all financial gifts made today will go directly to supporting our community of kids through the Caring for Kids program. As I call your name or organization, please stand and stay standing. And please hold your applause until all sponsors have been recognized. Mary Lynn and Warren Staley, Alina Health, New Horizon Academy, The Advocate Group, Sarah Boettcher and Brian Kingsley, Rob and Chris Johnson, B Financial Wealth Management, Bremer Bank, Michael Foods, Mike Fox with Engel and Volkers, Park Nicollet Health Services. Thank you, CFK sponsors. So many years ago, I became interested in helping set kids on the path for kindergarten readiness after I heard a speech from Art Rolnick. Art was an economist with the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis and is now with the Humphrey School of Affairs at the U of M. He said that a community can determine the amount of prison beds it would need in the future by looking at the literacy rates of the first few years of school. Can you believe that? I thought, wow, that seems like a pretty easy problem to solve. Let's just increase the literacy rates. Not so easy. At that time, my daughters were starting elementary school, and I had volunteered to listen to kids read in the hallway. I saw firsthand that the difference in reading levels of these different kids at school, and they had some pretty big obstacles to overcome. I came to realize that literacy rates wasn't an easy problem to solve, as all sorts of things can come into play. What is the support system like at home? Was anything being done to help these kids get ready for kindergarten? That's where Caring for Kids comes into play. CFK helps families overcome these obstacles so that every child has a chance to become all they can be. As a business owner, I see the importance of a strong community. A strong community needs to start with a strong foundation, and a strong foundation starts with our youngest learners. The Caring for Kids programs helps families and their children build the foundation they need to be strong. Part of this foundation is the ability to read. It's the foundation for learning. In grades kindergarten through third, you're learning to read. As of third grade on, you're reading to learn. If a child has that foundation in place when they get into third grade, they're not falling behind. This is the 5th year that I've chaired this breakfast, and you might ask why. Well, sometimes I think that some people think that there really isn't much of a need in this community. However, there is. We still have a lot of work to do, a lot of very important work, and that's why I keep coming back. As you listen to our amazing speakers today, I want you to think about 1 or 2 things that stick out for you, and thank you. And now it's my pleasure to introduce LaDonna Hoy, Executive Director of Interfaith Outreach and Community Partners. LaDonna is an extraordinary community leader whose gentle yet powerful presence has no equal. Her consistent, focused, and thoughtful leadership built this organization from a small program to an essential nonprofit serving those most in need in our community. Please welcome LaDonna Hoy.
Well, thank you, Nancy. A while back, my very dear friend Ellie Bathe shared a pearl of wisdom with me. She said, "You know, LaDonna, People can pretend to care, but they can't pretend to show up. How true. How true. I love that. I love her. And thank you all so very much for both caring and showing up for our kids today and yesterday, and please God, in the days ahead. A little over 20 years ago, over 100 community leaders came together around a vision of the community we wanted to be. We'd become intimately familiar with complex and systemic barriers that were keeping too many families and kids of our community stuck in chronic economic hardship and in the margins of their dreams. What was needed was a whole village infrastructure to go after removing barriers to affordable housing and employment and childcare and transportation and healthy connection with the life and opportunities of our community. Out of that gathering grew task forces, and out of those task forces grew initiatives, and out of those initiatives grew sustainable cross-system efforts and investment that continue to dismantle those barriers. Together, this community can be justly proud of how far we've come. Emphasis together. It does take a whole village. One of our earliest and most successful efforts was focused on making access to affordable quality childcare combined with parent education and family support available to struggling working families of our community. A jumpstart came when Messiah United Methodist Church in 2000 created an on-site affordable quality child care center, now called Bloom, and now, 20 years later, Bloom, one of 14 Caring for Kids quality early childhood provider partners, just this past week opened a second site hosted at Plymouth Presbyterian Church. Go Bloom, Glow Bloom. Now, over the same period of time, the demographics of our community have changed significantly. Who is Us looks very different than it did 20 years ago. There are 67 different languages spoken in the homes of students in the Wayzata and Orono school districts. Poverty in the burbs has grown faster than in the urban core. Rents that are rising faster than incomes in formerly affordable rental housing that is being sold and gone to market rate has sent an exodus of low-income families into a very tough housing market. If you can't get housing to work, it's very hard to get anything else to work. And all of our community institutions are on catch-up with the impact of that shifting demographic and housing trend. So we have to stay at this with the best that's in us, and we are. The Great Expectations Initiative is an ambitious cradle-to-career school and community initiative designed to close the opportunity and achievement gap of an estimated 500 preschool-age children at risk of arriving at kindergarten behind, and another 1,500 plus K-12 kids who are not meeting educational benchmarks. Most of these kids are kids from low-income families. Many of them are from families of color. And Caring for Kids is the foundational program of Great Expectations. If we can get this right, if all of our littlest kids have a strong start, all of the evidence-based research indicates they are positioned for a strong finish, and that's our goal. At the same time, we know that kindergarten readiness and school success is not just about academic rigor and achievement, it's about that whole ecosystem that surrounds and anchors families and kids in community and in all the ways that matter. The Caring for Kids approach to families and kids includes a focus on family stability. In a minute, Rachel Boettcher, our amazing Caring for Kids manager, is going to share something about the partnerships and the approach and the resources that align to make Caring for Kids the impactful model that it has become. And you'll be hearing from Dr. Chomolo about the critical holistic community support in early childhood, particularly at a time of critical brain development. And from our hero mom, Raquel, what that kind of support meant for her children and her family. And finally, from Todd Otis, the reason for his passion and unflagging advocacy for our littlest kids. But just for another minute, you have at your place the Great Expectations infographic. I'd like to call your attention to this for a minute. This describes our challenge. The challenge of Great Expectations is we want each and every child all along the way, from cradle to career, to get what they need to succeed in school, in community, and in life. That's it. Each and every child all along the way. On the flip side, you can celebrate with us the traction that the aligned and cross-system efforts and the heart and will of this amazing community is making possible. Beginning at the bottom here with our littlest kids and going forward with what's happening in elementary school and middle school, all the way into high school and even beyond high school. These are programs and initiatives that are being piloted that are making a critical difference for these kids, thanks to all of you. Now, speaking of heart and will, also I want to call your attention to the centerpiece at your tables, complete with books for preschoolers, books for older kids, math flashcards, a teddy bear bedecked with cap and gown and diploma, and paper dollars, in a little red wagon en route to carrying our kids to a strong and successful future. Many thanks to Barb Carlson and Gail Munsell and our wonderful breakfast planners for giving us this very symbolic visual of what we're about today. The books were donated by Maria Keller, who, when she was just 8 years old, learned that there were kids in this world who never owned a book. For 8-year-old Maria, that was unthinkable. So Maria founded Read Indeed with a goal to distribute away 1 million books by the time she graduated from high school. Maria just finished her first year at Notre Dame University and also reached a 3 million book mark. She is here with her mother. Will you stand, Maria? Where are you? Another example of what can happen. Finally, I'm beyond pleased to introduce Andrea MacArthur, who just 1 month ago accepted the position of Great Expectations Director. She brings to this position a wide range of skills and experience in strategic planning, community engagement, program development, evaluation, advocacy. Her experience includes work as an outreach and changing workforce specialist with the Met Council, where she was tasked with design and implementation of workforce development strategies targeting minority and underrepresented communities, which incidentally won the 2018 Governor's Better Government Award. And with the Greater Twin Cities United Way and health partners on Bright Futures Begin at Birth. Andrea is an intercultural development inventory qualified assessor. She is passionate about closing opportunity gaps and says, I welcome the community, or the opportunity to partner to build upon the successes of Great Expectations to date and drive closure of those pesky gaps. In one short month, Andrea has hit the ground running. She is here today with her mom and dad. Will you stand, Andrea? I know she will love to meet and hear from all of you in the days ahead. And now it's my privilege to introduce Raquel Boettcher, our Caring for Kids manager, who some of you may recall took time out to bring a beautiful new baby girl into our world, Rowan, and about a year later was ready to come back to us to lead the way for CFK. I have to say, when we learned Rachel was ready to return and sent the news out to all of the folks who were jumping up and down excited about that, the response was delightful. One of my faves was that from Chase Anderson that simply said, "Hallelujah." And so here is Hallelujah, Rachel.
Well, that introduction was more than I could have ever anticipated from LaDonna. Thank you. Before I get started, I just want to let you know there is a BMW with its top down, and it was just downpouring, so hopefully someone can run out there and fix it. LaDonna, thank you for always inspiring all of us to continue to become the best versions of ourselves. I feel privileged to be a part of this community through my work at Interfaith. I'm amazed at the way everyone comes together to do what's right, especially when it comes to our children and the families who love them. There are so many people involved in caring for kids without whom this program would not be in existence. Nancy and LaDonna have already said some thank yous, but there are just a couple more I'd like to quickly address. If you're able and willing to stand when you hear your name or group, please do so, and please hold your applause until the end. Thank you to our CFK Breakfast Chair and MC for the morning, Nancy Bergstrom. Thank you to our CFK Breakfast Committee. Thank you to Brenda Badger and Club YES students for helping out at this event for so many years. Stand up, you guys. Thank you to our Quality Provider Network sites. These are the early childhood care and education programs CFK partners with. As LaDonna said, we're up to 14 sites now with the addition of a new Bloom Center. These 14 programs are where so much of the magic happens, where parents have the security of knowing that their children are safe and cared for, and where highly skilled teachers nurture their development day in and day out. Thank you to Wayzata and Orono School District staff for your unwavering commitment and partnership. I also want to thank District 287 for all that you do to support children and families in our community. Thank you to our Caring for Kids case manager, Debbie Fink, who partners with all of the families who are part of CFK. And in that vein, thank you to all Interfaith outreach staff. Please stand up, staff. Our staff live and breathe our mission, and they truly believe in the power of each individual who walks through our doors. I'd also like to express deep gratitude for the Caring for Kids Advisory Council, Executive Committee, Prenatal to 3 Task Force, and 0 to 5 action teams. These groups are a force of knowledge, expertise, ideas, and innovation as we continue to enhance and build on this early childhood work. Thank you to the elected officials who are here today, school board members, chiefs of police, city council members, mayors, legislators. We are grateful for your continued interest and involvement in caring for kids, Great Expectations, and in all that you do to support the community. Thank you, thank you, thank you to parents and families of young children who have shared so much of their journeys with us, who have celebrated the successes and shared the challenges, who have taught us so much and helped us clarify how we can and should move forward in our work. I am honored to know you. Finally, I'd like to thank all of you for being here. You are the reason that we've been able to support over 1,000 children over the past 15 years and their families. Thank you, and please give yourselves a round of applause. In my brief remaining time up here, I am thrilled to bring you up to speed on what's happening with Caring for Kids. By now, many of you are familiar with the Caring for Kids model. It's tried and true, and as LaDonna said, it's evidence-based. This model includes tuition scholarships for young children to attend the early learning program of a family's choosing, holistic wraparound support services offered by Interfaith case managers and staff, which includes things like transportation, rent assistance, food support, and a caring person to talk with about all that's going on in their lives, access to parent education, early intervention, preschool screenings, and additional services through Orono and Wayzata schools, and warm connections to other supports, like mental health resources by way of parent-child interaction therapy, Relate Counseling, and Washburn Center for Children. We are also excited to continue to build relationships with healthcare providers like Park Nicollet. Together, these resources and services form a network of families with young children. One or several of these supports could be the missing puzzle piece or pieces a family is looking for. As we've talked about at past breakfasts, access to quality early learning programs along with these supports works. The CFK model has a positive impact on parents and their children, as we hear time and time again directly from families, all because one or two gaps in opportunity were addressed. The opportunity to access high-quality early learning programs and the opportunity to connect with job training supports, for example, can mean the difference between instability and thriving for a family. We've also talked at the last two breakfasts about the work we're doing to broaden our reach and impact. Last summer and fall, in partnership with Wilder Research and led by Catherine Tout, Interfaith board member and director of early childhood research at Child Trends, we conducted a survey with 150 families of our youngest community members, children aged birth to 3, to learn what was going well for them and what was challenging. We hoped to learn how we could be supportive in other ways, in addition to continuing to offer scholarships and wraparound supports to as many children and families as we could. The conversations we had centered on 3 broad categories: childcare, health, and family supports. From this survey, the first and probably most important and obvious thing we heard will come as no surprise to anyone in this room. Parents all want the very best for their children. They believe in their children's limitless potential and want to do everything in their power to help them reach it. Again, no surprise there. We learned that childcare continues to be a persistent challenge for families. Many have cobbled together care that is not stable or ideal. Though parents want high-quality, consistent, nurturing childcare and education programs, it is oftentimes simply unaffordable, especially when, as LaDonna mentioned, so much of their income goes towards increasingly high housing costs. We learned that families are seeking connection with other parents of young children. They want that community, the village we know it takes to raise a child. And for a myriad of reasons, some do not currently have support from family or friends. Parents shared that they have health concerns, not as much for their children, but for themselves. We know there is a link between parent health and children's health and well-being. This is where connection with healthcare providers is so crucial, as it impacts the entire family. Finally, parents are looking for education and information on child development to support their parenting. This comes full circle to the first point, that parents want the very best for their kids and want to do whatever they can to support them. As a result of our learnings, CFK has some exciting things brewing, in addition to continuing the work we're known for. The first is a pilot program set to launch this October, aimed at supporting parents of young children in forming their village and gaining the parenting and child development information. This is being developed in partnership with the school districts and other organizations. The pilot will start out similar to the impactful Early Childhood Family Education, or ECFE, programs our districts offer, and will be tailored specifically to and designed in partnership with the families with whom we're connected. The second is a deep dive into human-centered design work, where we will continue to draw on the expertise and wisdom of parents, families, teachers, service providers, volunteers, everyone who touches children and their families, all in order to continue to engage these stakeholders in meaningful ways as we seek to build on the Caring for Kids models to best meet the needs of our community. Finally, something I'm incredibly excited about, we are working toward expanding the number of scholarships we're able to offer. The need for access to high-quality care and education is at an all-time high, especially for infants and toddlers. This is evidenced by our findings from the Wilder Survey, our own internal Caring for Kids interest list, and estimates that there are 350 plus children in the community who could use access to quality early learning programs and family supports. Last year, we were able to connect 183 children and their families with CFK scholarships and wraparound supports. We do this by maximizing our budget through combining our dollars with other private and public funding sources. And I would just draw your attention to the back of your program. This pie chart kind of shows the different funding streams that Caring for Kids braids with. It truly is a group effort. Our goal is to increase the number of children in CFK by 10% beginning next spring, and we are on our way toward making this happen, thanks to a special fund which was announced this past May called the Founders Fund, and with your support. I think it's apparent to everyone at this point how much of a collaborative effort Caring for Kids truly is. We've accomplished so much, and there is still so much to do. Together, I have no doubt that we will continue to positively impact children, families, and our community as a whole, and that we will continue to seek out the gaps in opportunity and work together to find or build solutions. I'm excited to introduce our keynote speaker to you, who will now dive deeper into these opportunity gaps from his unique and valued perspective as a physician and early childhood advocate, and how addressing these gaps early on has incredible impacts. It is my honor to introduce Dr. Nathan Chomelo. A graduate from the University of Minnesota Medical School, Dr. Chomelo practices as a general pediatrician at Brookdale Clinic and an internal medicine hospitalist at Methodist Hospital with Park Nicollet Health Services and Health Partners. He is the medical director of Reach Out and Read Minnesota and is a strong advocate in the early childhood world. His advocacy work includes the impact that early childhood intervention and healthcare access have on the long-term prospects of our children and how physicians and health systems can address racial and health equity. Dr. Chomelo has been appointed to the Governor's Early Learning Council and helped start the organization Minnesota Doctors for Health Equity, where he serves as the vice president. His advocacy work has been recognized by Minneapolis St. Paul Magazine, by Reach Out and Read National, which awarded him the 2018 Medical Champion Achievement Award, and the City of Minneapolis Department of Civil Rights, which recognized him as a 2019 History Maker at Home recipient. To round out his incredible background, which I haven't even been able to fully share due to time constraints, Dr. Chomelo is also the father of a toddler. I can think of no better person to talk with us today. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Nathan Chomelo to the stage.
Thank you, Rachel. And yes, father of a toddler is by far the biggest achievement on that list. Well, thank you very much for having me here today. I'm really excited to talk to you. Thank you to LaDonna and to Interfaith for having me to talk about opportunity gaps. So that's something that we've heard a lot about, and so I'm excited to kind of give you my perspective being an advocate in this space. So disclosure slide, all the images here are used with permission or attributed. And then an additional disclosure side is one of the favorite descriptions of what I do has been called a physician activist. And so as I go through this talk, I'm going to be talking to you as a physician, and so you'll hear some information about health. I'll be talking to you as an advocate for racial and health equity, which means we'll be having some conversations about the impacts of race and racism And then we'll also be talking about policy, because that is some of the best solutions, I think, for widespread improvement. So, talking about gaps. To start, when you walk away today, I hope you are really questioning every time you hear the term achievement gap what we are really trying to achieve. Because the term achievement gap itself, at best, is misinformed, and at worst is deeply flawed. Because what does it talk about? It talks about what our students are doing, what our children are doing. And so that's the metric we look to improve, is our children's performance. But what we're not talking about when we talk about achievement gaps is we're not talking about the systems that have failed them. We're not talking about the systems that have to be improved to really give these children the opportunity to succeed. So I'm going to do that by talking about a case that is an amalgam of patients I might see any day that walk into my clinic. And I'm going to talk about some challenges that these families face. We'll talk about things that are being done right now in the community, and then what are some opportunities as we look forward. And so Lisa's a 2-year-old here with mom, and right from the get-go you can tell that there's something different. Mom is more stressed than the average mom of a 2-year-old toddler. And when you talk to her right away, you find out that she and Lisa are been evicted from their apartment, are now living in a shelter. So they're unfortunately a family that's facing housing insecurity or housing instability. Housing instability isn't just people that are homeless living on the street. It's defined as anyone who's not living in a home or an apartment building or some structure that they are actually living and paying for themselves. Right? So if you're living on your relative's couch or a friend's couch for a while, if you are in a shelter, if you are living out of a car, or even our families that are experiencing crisis and the migrant crisis at the borders or across the world, those are all families facing housing instability. In Minnesota, we know from a survey that's done every 3 years by the Wilder Foundation and several other social services, they do a count on one night every 3 years, and they look to kind of get an approximation of homelessness in Minnesota. And we know that since 1991, it's been consistently on the rise, and in the last 3 years, it went up 10%, while children with parents did drop a little bit. Overall, we see that homelessness is a crisis that we continue to struggle with here in Minnesota. And when you look at those numbers even further, you will see that amongst those who are homeless, about 40% are children or youth, or families with children or youth. And then based off of data from our school systems, we know that the types of families, the backgrounds of the families and children who are experiencing homelessness are widely disparate. And so we know that our American Indian and Alaska Native families are overrepresented by 6 times in the homeless population, and our Black and African American are represented 4.5 times. And so what does this do to a child's health in particular? We know that children that struggle and their families struggle with homelessness, they have more exacerbations and severe consequences of chronic diseases like asthma, that they have more issues with malnutrition and food insecurity, that they struggle from trauma that is related to the homelessness, that they're more likely to end up with accidents or injuries and have things like physical and psychological trauma that then leads to issues with behavior, troubles with academic performance, troubles with depression and anxiety as they get older. And overall, it leads to 2.5 times more likely to have any health problems and 3 times as likely to have severe health problems. And when you look at academics then, you see on the left, there's talking about 3rd grade math proficiency. If you look at family or children who struggle with homelessness or housing instability, that there's a great gap between those that meet or exceed 3rd grade math proficiency versus the average student, and that overall, children who, as you might imagine, are struggling with housing instability have poor classroom engagement, poor social skills, even if they've been homeless at any point. And 20 months after staying in an emergency shelter, we know that children will score worse in pre-reading skills, have higher rates of overall behavior problems, and early developmental delays. So, what's being done? I'm going to touch on just a couple things, and it's not an exhaustive list because there's lots being done, but I'm going to come from the lens of the healthcare and how we've tried to engage around some of these social determinants of health. And so the Community University Health Center, or also known as CUC, was one of the first clinics to have a healthcare legal partnership, and now there's about a dozen or so throughout the Twin Cities. Children's has a really vigorous one as well, and they have on-site legal staff, whether it's a paralegal or a lawyer, that you as a clinician can then consult to when you have a family, you come across a family that is struggling with housing instability or other issues. And what can that do? It can help the patients and their family get access to issues so that if there's threatening utility shutoffs, they can stop that. If there's issues with like mold that are creating worsening asthma or other health impacts, you can actually have legal rights to get that mitigated. And you can also prevent things like eviction and also figuring out reasonable accommodations if your child or yourself struggle with disability. From a policy standpoint, Homes for All is a coalition that has a really broad and well thought out policy agenda that they are at the Capitol every year pushing to help engage housing and homelessness across the state. In particular, when we're looking at children, there's a policy called Homework Starts with Home that looks to help engage families of children in the schools so that when schools identify that a family is struggling with housing instability, either actively homeless or at risk for it, that they can actually help mitigate that with rental assistance and other resources to help keep children in their homes with the goals of improving their academic success and prospects. And that is based on a pilot program that showed that it did exactly that in both St. Paul and Minneapolis. But policy-wise is good. I think culturally-wise, what are things we can do? And so there's the idea that housing and multifamily unit housing, low-income housing, has a lot of these negative stereotypes. And so I loved LaDonna's quote about showing up and how this is one of the ways we can actually not pretend to care, but actually show up, right? And so when there's this discussion about housing units and affordable housing, multifamily unit housing coming into our communities, how do we react? There's this term NIMBYism, not in my backyard. And it's based on some very, frankly, racist stereotypes about the types of families and communities that need these types of supports. And so it's great that if we get low-income housing to them over there, but over here, we don't need that. That's going to create an eyesore. And you can see that even from Plymouth circa 2011, the kind of language that was used, it's not blatant, but it's there. And it is one of the things that is a barrier to actually helping reduce housing instability in Minnesota. And so the Wilder Foundation's report shows that overwhelmingly, housing is one of the most direct paths to improved health among people experiencing homelessness. So we go back to Lisa, and as part of my clinic screening process, we ask a couple questions about food and nutrition and food security. And two of them are within the past 12 months. Do you ever worry that you would run out of food? And within the past 12 months, did you actually run out of food without any money to buy any more food? And these are known as the hunger vital sign. And so if you screen positive by saying often or sometimes true, then you're a family that's experiencing nutrition or food insecurity. And Lisa's family was experiencing food insecurity, which happens in about 16.6% of households with children in 2015 were found to be food insecure at some point. And in Minnesota, 1 in 10 households struggle with food insecurity. So in that first 1,000 days, we know that the brain is developing and that nutrition is important and critical as part of that brain development. And so it's, when we talk about malnutrition, we're not only talking about not having enough food, but we're also talking about having too much of the wrong types of food. And so it's both undernutrition and also obesity. And then we know that even early macronutrition, undernutrition is associated with lower IQ scores, reduced school success, and more behavioral issues And there was this interesting study that was done in Guatemala about 40 years ago that could not be done again, where 2 villages received a high-calorie, high-protein supplement, and 2 villages received just a low-calorie supplement, which contained some vitamins. And they provided for pregnant women and children underneath the age of 7. And so the children from the villages that had received a high-calorie, high-protein supplement before age 2 years scored higher on tests of knowledge, numeracy, reading, and vocabulary, and had faster reaction times in information processing tasks than the age-matched children who received that lower calorie supplement. So just getting supplementation, appropriate nutrition those first 2 years had long-term impacts. And so what are some of the policies that we have in place that help accomplish this? So WIC, which is the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, helps connect pregnant women, women who are breastfeeding, children underneath the age of 5 with nutrition. And in the United States, 53% of all infants younger than 1 are served by WIC. And it's a program that's actually been shown to help, particularly prenatally, help decrease preterm rates. And so you have longer gestations, less complications related to that, increased birth weights as well. And then there's SNAP, also more commonly known as food stamps. A modest benefit, only about $1.37 per person per day, to help those who qualify. About 40% of households receiving SNAP benefits have children, and this is another program that has been shown to have impacts on academic achievement, as well as decreases of stunting of growth. And then in Minnesota, about 270,000 children receive free and reduced price breakfast and lunch. And there's also a Healthy Summer Meals for Kids. It's a program that those who are eligible for the free and reduced price lunch can actually have healthy meals at different places throughout the community throughout the summer as well. So what's possible? So in the healthcare setting, we're starting to catch up with the importance of nutrition and the issues with food insecurity. And so Hunger Solutions is a project that was led by health partners and other health systems to look at just getting more primary care providers to screen for food insecurity, to ask those 2 questions, to see if your families are screening positive, then what do you do next? And so having resources available from your local community and being able to then connect your families to those right there in the clinic before they leave. And even my clinic had a pilot where we even, for families that were experiencing crisis in that moment, were able to give them a box of food to leave the clinic with that day. Super Shelf is kind of an extension of that, where we look to engage with the food shelves to actually make the food there that is nutritious and culturally relevant as well, because that's something that a lot of our families find is that if they go to a food shelf, they don't find the food that they actually are used to eating and preparing. And then Food RX is a really interesting program that Second Harvest Heartland is doing with multiple health systems, where they're looking at specific processes, patients that are struggling with things like diabetes, hypertension, or heart disease, and they come up with a specific nutrition plan. They have 3 different tracks: American traditional track, a Hispanic diet track, and a Somali track. And then these patients will get that meal, those meals or that food on a regular basis. They can pick it up at clinic, or even if they're too ill or frail at the moment to pick it up in clinic, they partner with paramedics to bring that food out to them at their home. And so this has been also shown to help improve health as well as decrease food insecurity. And then we need policy that follows the data. So there's actually this really interesting publication by some economists at Harvard that shows that WIC is a program that actually pays for itself, that we actually save money by putting money into WIC long term. And many of the programs for early childhood have that same type of return. Art Rolnick's great work has already been mentioned here, so we don't need to go too much more into that. But there's been attacks recently even on things like WIC and SNAP, things like the recent public charge rule change that's going to make it harder for some of our families who their children are American citizens to get access to this benefit that actually helps improve their outcomes. Same thing for SNAP and food stamps. And so looking for policy that actually follows the data is important as we look to how do we address food insecurity. All right, and back to Lisa. So after you've talked about and connected Lisa and her family with issues, resources for housing insecurity and food insecurity. Mom shares her concern that Lisa isn't using many words. At age 2, she feels that she should be able to use more words, and she's seen other family members where Lisa just seems to be behind. And so we know that gaps in vocabulary start early, and that the impact is long. And so that gaps in vocabulary can start as early as 18 months to 2 years, and that oral vocabulary at age 2 is actually a predictor of kindergarten academic performance, specifically reading and math, as well as behavioral function. And we know that kindergarten performance has predictions for our long-term success. And so you know there's also a gap in parental knowledge. And so this is from a really interesting survey from 0 to 3, a National Foundation that looks at early childhood issues. And they've surveyed parents of young children back in 2015. And they asked them, at what age does reading aloud to a child build future language skills? And 45% of parents, not too long ago, just said, not till 2 years does reading out loud help build child's vocabulary skills. Or how about what age does talking out loud to a child help grow their language skills? 34% said not till 1 year does talking out loud to your child help build your language skills. And so there's a gap there in knowledge. And as I said, many parents want to do their best, but they just don't have all the tools. And so meeting parents where they are at is a really important way to help address some of these opportunity gaps. So paid family leave is a policy that has been shown to improve breastfeeding rates and decrease, improve vaccination rates, as well as increase bonding between the parent and the child. And so a paid family leave policy that would help address some of these gaps. Home visiting, voluntary nurse home visiting, has been shown to improve academic outcomes for the children years down the road. And then Help Me Grow, which is a resource for healthcare and childcare providers, parents themselves, to help connect families when you do determine that a child is falling behind, to get them the resources earlier. And then I'm the medical director of Reach Out and Read, so I couldn't put a little plug in for the work that we do, of course. So if you haven't heard about it, Reach Out and Read is a evidence-based program that works with physicians and nurse practitioners in the clinics to help give patients and their families, when they come in for their well-child checks between 6 months and 5 years, a developmentally appropriate book, as well as guidance and tips. So how do you read to a 6-month-old versus how do you read to a 2-year-old versus how do you read to a 5-year-old? As any parent can tell you, lots of different tricks that you have to use to get the attention and really engage children at those ages. And so we help provide parents those tools. And this has been shown, as I said, it's evidence-based. It's been around for 30 years to increase parent engagement, improve vocabulary scores, decrease speech delay, buffers against toxic stress, and it's cost-effective and scalable. And so that gets to what is possible. So, Reach Out and Read right now reaches about 40% of the children in Minnesota. We just got some money to help expand that in other parts of the state, but that's a really low-hanging fruit to expand statewide. The Minnesota Early Learning Council, we came with recommendations over this last legislative session to saying that fully funding things like home visiting, fully funding early childhood learning scholarships and voluntary pre-K, these are the efforts that are needed to help decrease these opportunity gaps. And so, opportunity exists. We just spent a little bit of time talking about 3 of the areas, but there's multiple areas where we can really step in and decrease these opportunity gaps. And I really love this quote from economist at the U, Aaron Sojourner, about how we ask the most of our families when they have the least. And really how important that first 5 years is and how much we're asking our families, but how little support relatively we're giving them. And so that's where the work that Interfaith does, that the CFK program does, is so important to help families like Lisa. Get them housing and neighborhood supports, education supports as far as early learning scholarships, and food and family support. Hopefully by now you understand how each of these things are critical to a child's health and the ability to decrease the gap in opportunity. And then lastly, again, talking about why I'm up here as a physician, talking about all these different more socially related problems. When you look actually at what impacts someone's health, their actual interaction with the healthcare system is really relatively small, maybe 20% at most by most estimates. It's really the social and economic factors that are really impactful on their health. And so as a physician, if I really want to help my patients, help my community, I feel it's a part of my job to be up here talking about these issues. And then lastly, it's a gap in opportunity, not achievement. And so language matters, right? And when we talk about gaps in achievement in particular, what does that imply? It implies that there's one group that is setting the bar, and the other group has to get up to that group, right? And that's going to shortchange both of them, because if you look at any of these statistics, it's not that the gaps there are there for sure, but our white children are not performing where we'd expect them either. And so if we only focus on closing that gap instead of looking at the systems that are creating these gaps to help everyone, but in particular helping closing those gaps, I think we'll be doing a disservice. So I also wanted to say my parents are here too, so thank you guys. And I practice what I preach, so.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chomolo, for driving home how crucial it is to address the opportunity gaps that are prevalent so early on as we work towards supporting children and families and our community to thrive. We are grateful that you've shared so much of your knowledge with us today. I now have the absolute privilege of introducing another amazing person, Raquel Reitfeld, a smart, driven, loving mother of 3 young children and caring member of our community. As a result of today's breakfast, I've had the honor of getting to know Raquel a bit. I won't share too much in her introduction, as this is her story to tell, but I do want to say how strongly Raquel's love for her family shines through in every interaction I've had with her. She absolutely lights up when talking about her children and is clearly so proud to be their mom. This was evidenced by an email exchange where I asked if she had a couple of photos of her family she'd like to share here this morning beside her during a time when she was looking for support. Please join me in welcoming Raquel Reitfeld to the stage.
Thank you, Rachel, and good morning. As many of you know, it's our job as parents and as a community to build a secure and trusting environment for our children. Our background, culture, family upbringing, education, and faith molds who we are as people. We parents can work hard to give our children a good childhood and a bright start to their very first experiences in life. And as you know, we are all restricted to live within our means. So even though I, as a parent, I worked hard, I carried a full-time job, some college, a good family, I ran into life circumstances that I couldn't control. With these unforeseen events and the ups and downs of everyday life, I ran into challenges that no parent wants to face, which is, where can I place my child every day that I know is safe and secure? I'm originally from the Brainerd area, and I come from a community and a culture where asking for help is really hard and resources are scarce. My partner, David, and I, with our 3 children, Ariana, Landon, and Jordan, moved to Plymouth for new opportunities. We lived with David's mom, who provided childcare up until she had to sell her home and move to Rochester due to her adopted son, Osiris, needing a heart transplant. So David, the kids, and I had to move. I ended up finding an apartment that was well over my means of income, even though I was working full-time. David struggled with addiction and was in and out of treatment and unable to hold on to a job for long periods of time. I ended up in a situation where I needed to ask for help. I didn't know where to go. I had no family or established friendships here. So David's mom, Patty, who was a longtime resident, pointed me to Interfaith. I met with Aparna, an Interfaith case manager, and she helped me understand what resources were available, one being county assistance. But the county is limited as to what they can do, and I ended up on a year-long wait list. Like many others, I fell into the gap. I didn't need help in a year, I needed help right now. Aparna helped me enroll in Caring for Kids. I was able to get a Caring for Kids scholarship as well as scholarships from Think Small and Hennepin County. That combination of assistance made it possible for Ariana to enroll in Bright Start through Wayzata Public Schools and Landon and Jordan to get quality care at New Horizon Academy. While my kids were thriving in these places, which is great, I was still struggling to pay rent. The county said they couldn't help me, so I reached out to Aparna again and asked, what do I do? Aparna said that Interfaith could help. I worked with a different Interfaith case manager who reviewed my resume and qualifications. As I said, I had a job I liked through Alina. While working with the case manager and with added confidence, I had a conversation with my boss and I ended up getting a new title and a decent raise. I no longer had to pursue other career opportunities. During that time, Interfaith also helped me with my rent, car repairs, and we went to the food shelf multiple times. During the time I was waiting for support, there was some pretty rocky times. I didn't have a stable solution for childcare at home, and I would panic wondering who could watch my kids the next day. You want to put your kids in an environment that's safe, that's good, and you know that they're going to be taken care of. You can't just leave them with random strangers or unsettling environments. I didn't feel comfortable not having a permanent solution. When Interfaith reached out to me and said, we have funds available and you can pick which child care center you want to go to, I was so relieved and I could finally stop panicking. Prior to going to New Horizon, Landon was very shy. He would only talk to his immediate family and I. I even thought about putting him in speech therapy because he wouldn't talk to anybody else. But going into daycare, he was able to blossom as his own little person and shine through with his own personality. He got the social skills he needed to get set up for school and got his preschool screening. Jordan started out there as an infant, so she was very fortunate to grow with the program. And Ariana, who's never been shy, she's my 7-year-old going on 17. But going to Bright Start helped her develop her social skills and how to get along with other children. Bright Start really set her up for school, and today she'll be going into 2nd grade. I'm definitely in a better position knowing that I have stability and that my kids are being taken care of. I go to bed at night not having to panic about the next day, and I know that this has been a tremendous blessing to my family. The one thing that I am proud of is that I was able to reach out and become familiar with the resources around me. A lot of families don't know about CFK or Interfaith or the resources within their community that they could be utilizing. So I'm just happy that I took the steps to fill the gaps of where we were in. Taking the step to reach out and figure out what's out there, that's truly the hardest part. It's a lot of work. And yes, I put in the work, but I still needed that bridge to carry me over to resources within the community. Interfaith, the Caring for Kids Scholarship, and their partners were that bridge for me and my family. Interfaith has helped families like mine not panic for the next day and to calm the worries of what's to come. It's been a tremendous blessing to work with Interfaith, and I can only hope that they can continue their amazing work with helping other families in need just like mine. Thank you so much for being here today and listening to my story.